poetry for me has been about unpacking emotions and having a dialogue with yourself. I think a lot of guys can find it, especially younger guys, can find it easier to just not take the steps to know themselves, get to know yourself. And in a way, I don't blame it, because things get real complicated. Like when you start exploring yourself and asking yourself, who am I?
Yes.
Suddenly life gets really complicated.
Yeah, of course.
But if as a guy, you're like, you know what, this is who I am, and I'm not going to dig beneath the surface on this, life is easier in a way, because then it becomes more linear. But I think in the long run, you're doing yourself a disservice, because every single one of us is very rich in character, and we're not all the same. We're not this one-dimensional man who's just about like getting a good job, having a family, providing a family. We're much more than this. But the first step to kind of realizing that is asking yourself difficult questions. Why do I think in this particular way? What's my relationship like with my dad, with my friends, with my community? What do I actually want to get out of life? You know, what actually matters to me? Why am I upset by certain things? Why am I frustrated with certain things? These are really difficult questions, and there's no real answer. And your answer will change year to year. Poetry is just one way of doing that. But I know, you know, it doesn't have to be poetry. Music, sports is another way, because I think with sports, you're kind of telling yourself to push past your limits. And then when you can't reach those limits, you kind of tell yourself, okay, what's going on? It's just that level of introspection. And I think it can be really easy not to be introspective sometimes, because we don't ask that of men. We just ask them to be a particular way. And, you know, like you were saying, like sometimes your friends can get funny with you. Say, oh, why are you acting so, you know, why are you acting like this? You know, like it's not that deep. It's not that deep. But like, I think it's a long journey to get to know yourself. And I think it's a lifelong endeavor, and it's worthwhile. Whatever way works for you. I'm not saying poetry. You don't have to be a poet, but ask yourself some of the bigger questions and try to get to know yourself properly. Because I think life is rich. It's really rich when you give yourself space and time to explore why you like the things you like, or why you care about the things you care about.
Iftikhar, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing well, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, bro. I'm doing very, very well. Just straight into the cold open.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, man. Thank you for being here. I remember when I first saw you perform and saw your poetry open mics. My thought was like, oh, like I want to speak to you. I want to get you on a podcast. I want to try to discuss some of the stuff that I heard in your poetry that really resonated with me. And also, I also host an open mic, so I was like, oh, I think that would be a good point of discussion.
Notes, yeah.
Compare notes, exactly. So thank you for agreeing to be on with me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Any chance to speak, I'll take it up. Anyone who listens to me, but yeah, honestly, I think this is a really special place to be. So thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Also, okay, let's start from the beginning. If people have no idea who you are, how would you describe Iftikhar, the poet?
Yeah, so Iftikhar, most people call me Ifti. I don't care which one you call me. I would describe myself as primarily a poet, but in a broader sense, writer. I don't see myself as just writing poetry. I try to write all sorts of things. I actually got into poetry via short stories, which I could probably touch on. But yeah, so writer, producer, event organizer. I love the arts. I love seeing people who are at the beginning of their journeys and kind of growing into like, you know, more mature artists. And yeah, professional East Londoner as well. Got to say that.
We'll touch on that a little bit, because I don't know what professional East London is. But okay, you talked a little bit about the fact that short story was your entry into poetry. What was poetry to you before you started writing? Is what I wanted to know. Well, before you put pen to paper and start calling yourself a poet, what was your relationship to writing and poetry and that whole kind of arts?
So before I formally called myself a poet or anything like that, my experience of poetry is primarily through, you know, school. As I would say, most people in this country, that, you know, you study it in school, English classes, you read a lot of poems and you're just like, what the hell does this mean?
Yeah,
You do the whole, Shakespeare or whoever else it is, the whole PP paragraphs, what do the writer mean by like a blue curtain and just like all of this stuff. But when I was in primary school, and I can't remember the name of this book, it's so sad, but it was basically like a children's poetry anthology. So it had like Michael Rosen, who's like an absolute legend, but like all these other poets, they contributed these funny. I picked up the book because it had like a cartoon chicken on it, like a really like animated cartoon chicken.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. But it's like full of like all of these silly poems. And I remember there was like one poem that really spoke to me. It was about kicking jelly down the stairs. And I was trying to Google it and be like, I need to find this because if I ever have kids, I'd love to like share that with them. But it's like very like silly stuff. And I couldn't find it, but I guess that was like my earliest, that was the deepest poem to me, like kicking jelly down the stairs. But yeah, poetry wasn't a big thing for me. At least I didn't know it was a big thing for me. And then when I finished uni, so I graduated, like my final year of uni was like 2016, 2017. And for some reason, I just started writing that at that point. I think I was going through a few things. And then especially post-uni, I feel like some people experience a bit of a come down after they come out of uni. Because it's like you're going from one phase of your life to another and it's quite difficult. You're still very young at that age. And I was writing lots. And I used to write a lot of short stories. And one day, my friend Tanya, who I always credit as being like one of the biggest reasons I'm in poetry, she took me to an open mic event. It's Jaw Dance, which used to happen in Rich Mix in Shoreditch, hosted by Yomi Shode, and it's by Apples and Snakes. Probably, one of the biggest forces in the UK poetry scene. And I realized when I was seeing these people perform poems and like, all of this stuff, I loved everything about it. And I realized like a lot of the short stories I wrote as monologues could be kind of considered poetry in the sense that like they were quite confessional. I would, reveal things in a particular way. Some of them were done quite artistically, like repetition and this, that, and the other. So that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to lean more into writing the poetry. So yeah, it was a bit of a roundabout way. And that must have been like 2018. So it's been a few years. I still consider myself like a beginner poet. I still feel like I'm not quite where I want to be, but that's incredible because it makes poetry like a lifelong endeavor. And yeah, like the rest is sort of history. I love poetry events so much, I started my own. So I run a poetry event called Off the Chest, poetry organisation, I should say. So we do workshops as well as poetry events. And we've released a sort of anthology last year, Spaces of Significance. And as if that wasn't enough, after running that for 5 or 6 years, I started another one last year called Testing Ground, which is not exclusively poetry, but because most people who know me are poets, it's like 99% poets come through, even though I'm like, guys, we're the musicians. Like, anyone can do anything on the mic, but it's like, 99% poetry, but I'm grateful. So yeah, like, obviously poetry is a massive part of my life. And I love reading. I love reading poets, but also novels, non-fiction as well. I tried to kind of set myself a bit of a plan for writing other things. But for the time being, I really want to just focus on writing poetry.
I want to get more into, because first of all, thank you. That was a beautiful kind of like overview of your life of poetry until now. And it's very difficult to do because I've done it a few times. But I want to get more into kind of like the Off the Chest and Testing Ground a bit later when I delve into the poetry community. But before that, I love poetry. So I want to talk poetry. I want to geek out on poetry a little bit with another poet. So when you started writing poetry, what were some of the things that you had to kind of understand about the process? What was like some of the first things that, as a poet, when you started like getting all these ideas together, you're saying that you used to kind of write in kind of monologues, taking it from monologues to kind of putting them into kind of like poetic, I guess, pentameter or like poetic form.
Yeah.
What was that process like? What was some of the stuff that you had to kind of understand about poetry?
So I think going to like an open mic event really made me realize that poetry is not just the stuff you learnt about in school. Because I think in school, on the national curriculum, it is very much about form and iambic pentameter and all of these other things, alliteration, rhyming schemes, and all of this. But I went to jaw dance that time, and like the way people were doing poems in such different ways, it kind of blew away all of those preconceptions I had about poetry. Particularly being exposed. So for those people who might not be as familiar with like poetry or performing poetry specifically, there's this divide. This is very cliche, so don't take it as like hard or fast, but like there's a cliche between spoken word artists, spoken word poets, and page poets. And I think the distinction is page poets are more exactly what it sounds like. You've written it. It's the poet wrote it intending for it to be written on a page in a book or whatever. But spoken word is more about performance and kind of delivery, your cadences when you're saying things on mic. So because I was more exposed to that stuff, I was like, oh, forget everything I learned in school. Maybe I should, try and focus more on the performance element of things. So for me particularly, I kind of wanted a bit, everyone starts out terrible. Like there's no two ways about it. Some of the stuff I was doing in 2018, I'm kind of glad my memory's bad because I was cringing at myself.
Yes. Yeah.
I would do shit like, I went onto like one open mic and I took off my like top. And I was thinking, oh, that's so hard. Like nobody would have thought, keep them guessing. And then I proceeded to deliver the worst poem known to man. And then I was like, I had to put my shirt back on and just meekly sit down. And the host didn't even really acknowledge what happened. They just moved on to the next.
You took off your top so you were just bare-chested?
Dark time. Well, this is a thing. Yeah.
Part of the process, right?
It was, yeah. I'm cringing out, but at the same time, I'm glad I made my mistakes early.
Absolutely.
Or a lot of these mistakes early, because it's the only way you're gonna learn. But I think I leaned too much into the spoken word side of things, because then I was neglecting the crafts of writing the poem itself, because you have to strike a balance between like performance, doing it in a particular way, but then also it doesn't matter how good of a performer you are if the actual contents of the poem isn't good. So that's when I moved back more towards thinking about form and like pentameter, I guess, to a little extent, or at least the way it flows, using certain words, sentence length, stanzas, how I make it kind of all flow in together. Line breaks, all of these other things. So I am thankful for the pandemic for that, because I think it told me, obviously you couldn't go out to events anymore, but that time to just chill at home and write, it made me kind of realize, okay, I've done the work on the performance side, I guess, even though I feel like I still need to learn a few things. Let me focus more on how it looks on the page and how it, the actual sort of groundwork of it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And I think going forward now, I think I'm more interested in the actual page poetry side of things versus the performance. Because I think I can't remember, I was doing a workshop. I think it was with Danez Smith, but they were saying like, you could be a bad performer, and loads of people might disagree with this. You could be a bad performer, but if your poetry's gold, the poem will carry you,
Absolutely.
But if you're a good performer, but your poem is trash, there's only so much your performance can cover up for the fact that, like, at the heart of it, what you're saying isn't good enough. So I took that to say, even if I deliver something in a way that isn't the greatest, if the gold is there, like, it will shine through.
I completely agree. And I think my experience of like understanding that process for me was I always like link poetry with like emotions. like, you know, like describing emotions.
Yeah.
For me, often earlier in my life, emotions was cloudy. It's very difficult to like tell which emotion was which until I started writing poetry, and then seeing it abstracted in front of me, you know, in words, was like, okay, maybe I can't describe the emotion to someone through words, but like this way of going around about it in a way, kind of just talking around it, giving me more clarity of it, you know? And so like refining that process became very, very important to me. And so I think I agree with you where it's like, yes, standing up on stage and showing it people is also a part of it, is that, you know, it's catharsis, almost like cheer. But even more important than that, the reason I started that was sitting there in my room, having like a word or a line that I can't stop thinking about and like going over and over again, trying to get it right, or like trying to like put it together and like analyzing it like that. On that point, actually, I want to analyze some a few lines that I found from your poems that I really like resonate with, and I want to kind of understand from the source where it came from. So you have a poem called I want to get the name right. You have a poem called "My Chosen Path Was Eggs."
Yeah.
First of all, where is that title? Where does that come from? Let's start there.
God, so I wrote this poem, I want to say in 2020, sometime around then. And I'd say a common theme, one of the biggest subjects in my poetry, like the biggest topic I constantly return to, is around my parents. And I think there's a lot to explore through poetry on that subject, because poems are... Well, I'd say most poems are open to interpretation. People can take them in different ways, and I think a relationship with your parents can be sliced many ways, right? Most people would agree that they have quite complex relationships with their parents,
to say the least.
So I always found poetry to be like quite a good way to explore how I feel in relationship with my parents. So My Chosen Path Was Eggs is, I guess, about... So this chosen path is about what you're going to do with your life. What's your chosen path? Which path are you going to take? So the first line, the title comes from the first line of the poem, really. And I love when like the title is just straight into like, that's the coldest of cold openings. Like that's part of the poem, the title. So the full two lines are: my chosen path was eggs that I fried instead of letting grow. So I guess it's about like my parents, I guess, would have wanted me to like grow these eggs, think about the long term, think about having a life that's, I guess, very sort of linear. You know, you come out of uni, get a big job, get married, start a family, buy a house, da-da-da-da. But I was like, I want to have my fun now. So let's crack these eggs and let's have them. So I guess it was like, I was clearly hungry, like when I was, but like I thought, the idea of like delayed gratification versus immediate gratification. You can either let the egg grow into like something better, but like sometimes you just gotta have it right now.
You gotta crack it open and fry it. I completely agree. I think what makes it so fascinating to me, it's such an enchanting title, because as soon as you hear it, you go, what does this mean? It could mean anything, but I think it's engaging straight away, which is so important. But I think over the course of the poem, what I really love, and there's so many good lines. There's so many good lines. There was a couple of lines you had. It was like, towards like the middle of it, you go, when it's time to go, I take the long way home so I can enjoy the post-link up thoughts for dessert and wonder whether I am the doubts that weigh me down, whether I'm the person my mates praise me to be. I think that's how the line goes anyway. And to me, that's like very, very, like, that's what I love about poetry, is that someone could touch on a feeling that you yourself have had and you go, oh, I wish I wrote that. Which is what I love about that. So talk to me about that kind of, that part of the poem.
So
what was the sentiment there?
I think a major part of the poem is about wasting time with your friends. So, I mean, there are multiple inspirations for this poem. Around, obviously, you know, the pandemic happened largely through 2019, 2020. And that was a really hard time for loads of people, me included. And I think for me, it was the fact that like I was cooped up inside. So I was living with my parents at the time, but I had to move out because it was like getting way too much. And I was like, if I don't do this, like, yeah, like this pandemic's long. Like, so I moved out. But like before I had moved out, one way, I guess it was the summer of that pandemic. And I think the rules were relaxed where you could hang out with people so long as you're outdoors. And I remember hanging outdoors with my friends, even though we were all like, you know, like 22 at this time. We weren't exactly kids, but it took me back to that feeling of like, you know, when you're playing out with your friends,
Absolutely.
like as kids.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like that. And it kind of got me through a large part of the pandemic, just not being socially isolated, connecting with friends with zero objective. Like we would just go to the park, sit down on a bench, talk for ages, you know, get up to shenanigans, all of this stuff. And then it would get like, you know, the long summer nights would come and it would get dark. And then you're just like, okay, it's time to go home, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But I'm not even in a rush to go home. So I took like, instead of taking the bus home, I would just walk all the way. And I would just think about things. And I'm like, I literally did nothing today. Like I achieved nothing. But at the same time, I felt like it was so needed. Sometimes you just need to have time with your friends, do nothing at all, have a good time, and then that's just life. And we do it again the next day, the next day, the next day. And I think, yeah, like that's what this poem's about. Like, despite this pressure from society to be somebody, to be something, do something with your life, your parents, whoever else it is, sometimes you've just got to chill, you know? And there's a song by an artist called Bakar. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, and the song is Chill. And I think the whole song is literally just about like hanging out. I don't know if he's hanging out with a girl or with his friends, but like, I think am I really going to sing? It's something like, da-na-na-na, chill, yeah, da-na-na-na, chill. Like that. And I remember I had that song on loop at the time. And I was like, I want to write like a poetry equivalent of this song where all it's about is just like hanging out with your friends. And that's where this post-link up thoughts thing came from. Because sometimes that is like the best form of therapy, you know, like just literally hanging out with good friends, talking shit, you know, getting nothing out of your day, and then
like I love that so much because it kind of like it makes you understand how important it is to like have those moments, especially as you get older and you look back. Because when you look back, you don't understand how the moments of not going anywhere, not doing anything, not feeling like all your responsibilities are going to pull you one way or the other, how important that little time is. That, you know, you're like, you know, you feel like it's funny how time works, because in that moment you want to look forward. You want to be like, oh, I can't wait until I leave home. I can't wait until I can like have my independence and have get a job. And I feel like it's almost like that scene in Interstellar where he's looking, he's like, don't go. He's knocking on the window. He's like, don't. It's like that because he's like, don't grow up. It's a trap, because the moment you do, you start realizing the responsibilities start pulling at you, and those moments of hang, moments of chill, you lose that, you know. And I love that. And that line of like, you know, wondering if I am, you know, what my doubts tell me to be, or if I am who my friends praise me to be. That dichotomy of, you know, any self-aware person will have for themselves, being able to doubt themselves, but would also understand that these are just like my brain just playing tricks on me, you know. Like, I think that's so important, and I think that's beautiful that you kind of phrase it that way.
Yeah, I mean, things can get really heavy. I think we live in a society that's all about achieving things. I think especially for young people as well, it's really frustrating where we've been told if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll be rewarded for it, and you'll have a great life. But like, you have so many people who are now graduating from university, for example, good degrees, struggling to find jobs, or even those who are in jobs. There's no path to promotion. There's no reward for all of this hard work. People struggling to buy houses, or they're renting for extortionate prices. Things just keep getting expensive. This is why I think like loads of people got into Labubus. It's like,
go on.
It's like you're buying in. I mean, I'm stealing this from a reel I watched, but like, yeah, somebody could probably tell you where I got all this info from. But the video I saw, it was basically saying like, with young people, you can no longer, like, saving up and then buying a house is like not even an option anymore for the vast majority of people, because deposits are so high, jobs pay really low, and also you're renting. And, you know, meanwhile, if you're not living with your parents, you're renting. So, like, where can you even save your money? So you're excluded from that lifestyle. But now we have these small goodies, this treat yourself culture, where you can buy into lifestyles immediately and get some sort of payback from it. Labubus is one way. I think the other way was like avocado on toast, like the millennial days. I'm not a Gen
Never
Z,
heard
I'm
of
millennial.
this. This is insane.
Yeah. Or like, you know, matcha lattes and stuff. Basically, it's this idea of like buying things to make yourself feel better, but then feel like you're part of things. Whereas like in the past, I guess, like parents' generation or even like 10 years prior, 20 years prior, people would, you know, not do these things, but at least they can get those big life goals out of the way, because, you know, they had that path. House prices weren't as expensive, or, you know, like their jobs would actually pay like a decent amount. So yeah,
that's a fascinating point, the commercialization of identity and what it means to own something and become that thing because you own it. And now I've talked a lot about like the struggles of our generation, because I think I'm fascinated by that and like how we can unpack it. But I love to also talk about solutions. So like I think a solution to that is poetry. Like poetry will save the world. Anything circular reasoning. I think that the solution that is community, more specifically, which was what I'm seeing. Like I mentioned before, I know that you obviously run poetry events. I know that you've seen the same thing I've seen, which is an influx of people searching for community. And once they find it, they're so hooked, because there's a very rare, you know, I think it's rare that, especially in the West, you find a community of people who are like-minded, and especially poetry, where it's like open and, you know, generous and like, you know, kind of vulnerable. It's very, very difficult to find that. So what have you learned from like hosting your kind of both your nights, you know? Talk to me a little bit about that, why you started them, what you've learned about them, some of the stuff that you've kind of understood about community from that.
Definitely. I think so when I first started getting into poetry open mics, so Jordan's was the first one. I remember from that first event, so the host was Yomi Shode, who is like a huge poet in his own right, probably one of my inspirations. But like he was the host, and the way he was hosting was like really uplifting, because like when you go to poetry events, a lot of people come alone. They might come with one friend, but the vast majority of people don't know anyone else there. So the host plays an integral role in making everyone feel safe and comfortable and keeps the show running. And I was going to a few events, and I was like, oh, I'd love to make my own one, because like I caught the poetry bug. And I was like thinking, how can I like bring people together in this way and do it like my own style? So I used to live in Mile End, and across the road from where I lived, and I grew up in this area, there was like a new cafe called the Highland Cafe, and I used to go in there, have a coffee, read a book or whatever. And I noticed at the back they had like a space, like just empty space. And I was thinking one day, like I went up to the owner, I was like, would it be okay if I like ran like a poetry night here? And he was like, you can have it for free so long as people buy drinks. And I was like, okay, I'm set. That's like the first part of the puzzle. And then I was thinking, okay, how else can I do this? And then I went to like an open mic night one day, and I saw this girl perform on the mic, and she was like really on it. You could tell like she had her shit together. And her name was Ella Dorman Gaich. So like afterwards in the interval, I was like, hey, like I was thinking of starting this open mic night. I don't know what it was, but like I think it's like one of those classic fate moments. So I asked her, do you want to run it with me? And then we could work together. She was like, yes, let's do it. And I think if it was anyone else, Off the Chest wouldn't have been as successful. But I think Ella and I have like a really good sort of chemistry in the way we work. And she drove a lot of it to begin with, even though I'd kind of found the space and all of this and that. And so Off the Chest was born in October 2019. And I think my ethos around that was always about bringing people together for poetry, because I think a lot of people are looking for spaces. London is a really unique place where like there's so many people. Ironically, it can feel lonely because like there's so many people about. Surely, like I wouldn't feel lonely. I'd speak to people, I'd get to know people. But actually, the more people there are, the more lonely you can feel when you don't have a community. And I think poetry is a unique sort of, by its very definition, it's quite intimate. And so you're kind of skipping the small talk when you're in a poetry space because people are bearing their souls, you know. So you're immediately finding connections in a poetry space that you might not in like a music space, for example, or somewhere else. And so when I ran the first few events, I was like, we're onto something here because I'm feeling like I'm bringing people together. And in fact, like years later, people have come up to me and said, oh, I made friends with this person because of you guys. Like you gave me an excuse to like find other people. And that's what, that's a big part of what drives me, I think, bringing people together. And of course, the poetry as an art form is great, but like bringing people together is something special.
It's so beautiful, honestly. Like just seeing it, because you see people kind of like open themselves up there. It's very rare, like you said. You know, poetry is such a vulnerable art form that you really are bearing your soul. So once you bear your soul, I'm not going to ask you about the weather. Like,
exactly.
I really want to. What you said was so resonating. Let's get straight into it. And you find those kind of people where. They're very deep people. You know, a lot of times in life, I feel like a lot of us have grown up, people saying you're too deep. Or like you take things so too deeply. And then you find poetry and you're like, wait, everyone is like that. Everyone here is that deep. Yeah, they do take stuff that deep. And it's like, it opens you up to kind of share that part of yourself and be open and, you know, connect to another person. And the beautiful...
passion as well. Like, it's not just about being like really sad immediately or really revealing. You just want to be in a space where people actually give a shit about what they're doing. I think maybe in British culture specifically, there's a sort of like inbuilt, and I do it as well. You don't want to seem like the guy who cares too much.
Yes.
Right? You don't want to seem like that person who's like trying too hard.
Yes.
But with poetry, it demands passion from you. You can't half-ass poems, right? You have to go all in. And I think that passion, whether it's about a cause, whether it's about just yourself or, you know, whatever else it is, that's what opens up these doorways for better conversations and better relationships, I think, you know?
What are some of the hardest parts about running a poetry open mic? What are some of the logistics, or is it like hosting or?
I would say the lack of money is an obvious one. I think the state of the arts in this country is dire, and it's only getting worse. And I don't want to sound like, you know, like such a nihilist about it, but the truth is, the people who run this country, they're letting the arts sector be ran into the ground, and part of that is because there's a lack of funding around the arts in general. I'm not saying like I was expecting to come out of the gates and be funded, but I think when it started as a small thing, it was cool. You know, it's like you'd get your mate who's a poet and be like, oh, I can only really pay you £20. Is that okay? Even though it's not okay, they would say yes. But they probably made a loss like on that, because like it cost £10 to get to the venue, and then like, I don't know, £10 for like dinner because like it's an evening event, and then they've overspent that £20 already. But that, I guess you can get away with it when you're beginning. But then if you want to build, you know, because you want to grow, and we wanted to take off the chest into like more purpose, because, you know, the cafe, Highland Cafe was great, but it was tiny. It was probably like just a bit bigger than the size of this room in terms of the space we were in. Yeah. We didn't even have a mic. Like, literally, like,
just project your voice.
Just project your voice. People were sitting on the ground because we didn't have enough chairs. There's one toilet for like 40, 50 people. It was all of this stuff, right? So like, it's cool to begin with because like, you know, it's like a nice intimate vibe, But like after a year of doing that, it's like, are you still going to do it that way? No, you want to get like a mic in, you know, you want to make people feel comfortable in chairs. You want them to, you know, we didn't even have a person to kind of check people's tickets. So it was like solely on a trust basis. So like, we didn't even know if half these guys paid for like their tickets. We're just, oh, you know, they look like they probably paid.
Yeah.
And you want to pay yourselves as well, because it is a job. So that's hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's really hard. I mean, we've been successful a couple of times with Arts Council England, but like, yeah, you've really got to find those pots of funding. And you don't want to overcharge. Another way you could get around it, I guess, is if you charge like £20 a ticket, and then you could like fairly pay everybody. But then you're isolated. I come from like a working class background. I don't want to raise my prices to a crazy amount, you know, and then it changes the vibe as well. That's hard. And I'd say the second hardest thing is the amount of organization you've got to be on. Because I think a lot of people assume, yeah, like running a poetry event, it's all fun and games. You know, you just, it's just vibes, right? But the amount of emailing I do, the amount of messaging, the amount of like admin behind the scenes, 90% of running these events is marketing and admin. Yeah, like it's not... It's sometimes, I mean, I do it because I love it, but like that's the one thing you won't see from the outside point of view. And it can be hard when you're already overwhelmed and with other things, but it has to be done.
No, I completely agree. I think it's even bigger than, but just because I also run events and I see that too. 100%, most of it's just like the admin. Eventbrite, my best friend, because it's just all day I'm on Eventbrite trying to like tweak this, tweak that, do this, and just like the amount of emails, the amount of like social media management. I hate Instagram so much, but it's a part of the game. You know, you have to be able to connect to people, record yourself, promote this events so people can come. It's all of these things that people don't see and people just take for granted because it's just like, you know, it's front facing.
Definitely.
I think that's, but okay, all of these things, they do lead up to a sense of achievement when things do go right. So I know that you recently had your 6-year anniversary with Off the Chest.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some of the achievements that you're proud of, what you guys have done.
I think, Off the Chest is such a massive, massive part of my life. And it's taught me so much running the organization. So it's taught me about how can you reach audiences. It's taught me how to get better at creating social media stuff, which I think is kind of important to know, even if you hate Instagram, which I'm starting to get there. It's taught me about how to host, make people feel okay in a room. Because I think a lot of the times, like, the vibe is set by the host, right? It's taught me how to talk in front of a room full of strangers without feeling nervous. It's taught me to appreciate what goes in to getting people just in a room, you know? Like, and I always bang on about this, but like, if you truly care about the arts, it's not good enough just to share it on your story. And I appreciate not everybody, you know, people are busy, like, they might not be able to get down to like a random place on a Thursday night. But like, if you truly want to support the arts, the number one thing you can do is be there in that seat and witness it or engage with it, you know? And running Off the Chest has made me appreciate the arts sector in general. Because some people, I know like so many artists are probably doing this without getting paid. They're stressing themselves out just to make something happen. And it's made me realize, like, a lot of the things I take for granted that are happening within the community, somebody's had to really work to put it together. So it's taught me that. It's taught me about producing, I suppose, like writing, funding applications. The biggest achievement with Off the Chest, in my opinion, is twofold. Like, building an audience from the ground up. Because I think we've got some fans now, people who, you know, you meet loads of friends. Like, I made so many friends through that scene. I've learned about myself through the scene. And the second thing is, like, publishing space of significance. So, like, we have, I should have bought one here, but, like, we have anthology. So we took submission. I think we got over 500 poems submitted to us. And we obviously had to narrow it down. But we did a book. And that was 5 years into running the thing. So, like, that was a massive achievement. Being at festivals, we've been at All Points East. We've been at, last year we were at Love Supreme for the first time. Being in different cities, so we're not just based in London. We did events in Leeds and Brighton as well. Getting through the pandemic, using Zoom and Instagram Live to do virtual open mics. And just, you know, making a real, like, making a real difference, I suppose, to people's lives on a small scale. So yeah, I'm super grateful for all of
I mean, like you mentioned, it's just, I don't think it's a small skill, and like I know what you mean. And obviously, there's a sense of like humility with that, but I think affecting even one person is so important. You know, like I was watching this Instagram reel by James Baldwin, and he was talking about how he was making an example of Dostoevsky, like, you know, reading Dostoevsky will kind of make you understand suffering, and you realize you're not the one who suffers, and then not realizing you're not the one who suffers connects people, and I think that's so important. I think stuff like poetry is like like amazing ground for that. Well, when you go to these places, you realize some people are really going through it, like, but in a way they have the strength to share it. You know, there's some amazing writers out there. Some people who come up on stage, like, you know, they're like, oh, I don't know, I don't have my first time, and then they'll say this amazing, like, flowing, introspective, vulnerable poem, and you're like, where did that come from? That's amazing. Please do more of that. Because you understand that all of us have a world inside of us we're trying to share. And I think that's kind of what I've really, really noticed by running these nights.
I mean, like, the open mic concept as well, like, that open mic performance might be the beginning of a lifelong poetry career experience or whatever. And like, I'm proud to have given people that space, you know. And like sometimes, you know, you've spent like a month stressing about an event that you need to deliver. The event itself flies by and you're like, oh, I worked so hard for this event. It's already like at the interval and it's going to be finished. And you're like, oh, I put in so much effort. And then you just hear one person on the open mic deliver the craziest poem and you're just like, okay, I know why I'm doing this. Like, it's a difficult balance between running an event and also enjoying the event, because I'm always like, I tell people, don't talk to me because I'm not, I can't be here, because I'm like, I have to be very aware of the fact that everyone else is here also, and I'm like, I want to connect with you in this moment. You're talking some real stuff here. It's like somebody comes up to you in the interval, it's just like, I just want to say I love this event. And you're just like, time's
like,
running out.
man.
And you don't want to appear like an arsehole, because obviously like you have to make people feel welcome. But like you're stressing in the background.
Exactly. And I always say, I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm overstimulated, man. Like there's so many things going on. Like that person is trying to talk to me, you're trying to talk to me. Like, I will literally be here with you. Let's sit down, let's talk. Just give me some moment.
I had one like off the chest event where like I'm cringing, but like I had too many pieces of paper, right? And I don't know why. I normally don't have this many pieces of paper, and I had wrote like somebody's bio here, open micer names here, all this other crap, like unnecessary, like and then like I remember I was like, and the next performer is, and then I'm like flicking through the paper and like just that alone, and then you kind of forget there's like 50 people watching you fumble about with paper, and you're like, this is a joke. Try not to be self-conscious about that part. It's amazing.
But no, I love it. I love the scene so much. Talk to me about like what you think is going next, because I feel like with poetry, it's a difficult, because we don't want it to be, again, I'm speaking for myself, I don't want to see poetry become as commercial as music has become, where it becomes palatable for people because they feel a connection, you know, to something, and it's a beautiful connection they feel. But if it becomes too commercial, which is like we want it to become commercial because we want to put more of it, and like we understand what it takes to actually put on these events. But if it becomes too commercial, then the essence of what poetry is, which is like sharing something, gets diluted almost. That's my point of view. What do you think about that? What do you think about the future of poetry? What do you think will kind of start heading?
So I have an interesting view, I think, on this. I think by its very nature, poetry is really hard to commercialize, especially in this day and age, where we're a very, very visual culture, and particularly now we're very video based as a culture. So like social media, short form video is the like thing, isn't it? YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. And whilst you can put poems on reels and all of this other stuff, it's not the same. Not all poems are going to be able, you can't put a poem in a reel all the time. Some poems are long. Some poems, the effect you don't feel unless you read it yourself. Some poems require you to be in the room when the person is performing it to really feel it. So unlike music or unlike even comedy, because I know a lot of comedians are now doing like reels, and it works because like you can get a joke into like 30 seconds to a minute. Poems are really inflexible in that sense, and a lot of people just aren't interested. It's quite niche. You know, like in my family, I don't think there are like any people who are like into poetry, and I got a big family. Like, so whilst I understand, like, yeah, we don't want it to be commercialized, I don't think it can be. It can be to like, I guess, like a very sort of superficial sense. So I think like Rupi Kaur, who I used to be a hater, but now I'm like, actually, you know what? Like, you brought a lot of attention to like poetry through Instagram poetry, you know, like the whole like pretty on the page, line drawings next to it, and then like sharing. It's very shareable on Instagram. I'm happy with that. Any sort of eyes, you know, the saying, "A rising tide lifts all boats."
Yeah.
I think it's good because I think if somebody's going to like the really commercial poetry event, you know, one that's got like just the big poets, it's not really an open mic. It's in like a space where it's not traditionally got like poetry crowds. I'm happy with that because they will then, by their own volition, be like, okay, now I know about this one. Let me go to this poetry night. Let me do this. Let me write a poem myself, see how it feels. Let me read a poet. And I think that can only filter in and be good for all of us. So yeah, it's like, it's hard to make poetry commercial, but even where it is, actually, I'm happy. Like, so long as people are reading and engaging with poetry, I think that's what matters, you know? Like,
I completely agree. And I think on that point about people reading and engaging in poetry, one thing I've found recently, the one thing I've also tried to push is within my community that I want more guys to write poetry.
yeah.
I keep telling my friends, you know, it's funny, my experience has been hilarious. I went from playing football, so I was part of a football crowd, to writing poetry. So I got clowned for like years. And because I'd write poetry about girls, and then I'd be like, oh man, they were like, oh, look at you, you know, a bleeding heart. But I was like, oh, but like, you know, but now I've seen a shift where there's more vulnerability shown in poetry. And I think I wanted to ask you a question about the role you think poetry, or like the form of poetry, plays in the conversation we're having at large about masculinity.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more than just about the idea of masculinity, but I think that the role of vulnerability in our culture, we are becoming less and less vulnerable with each other because we start to feel like there is a wall that we have to put up. You know, I feel like these like phones allow us to be ourselves, but not really, an extracted version of ourselves, which is okay, but it kind of also makes it difficult to share yourself and be vulnerable. So yeah, like, can you speak a little bit more about that idea of like, what role do you think vulnerability plays in this kind of climate that we have currently, and also a little bit more about how it affects guys, you think?
I mean, I think masculinity and vulnerability is like a massive topic, so I'm going to try and just speak about it from my point of view. I think for me, I've had to recognize in myself that I'm actually quite a sensitive, emotional person. In some ways, that's been really self-destructive. Like, I'd be like angry and I didn't know why, but like a lot of the anger would be like internalized. So I'd be angry at myself. A lot of negative talk, frustration, feeling like I'm going nowhere with my life. So then it turns into like anger, then turns into like a sadness, feeling demotivated. And I think it's especially bad for guys because obviously there's a very traditional sort of sense of how a man should be. Like, men should be strong, they should be the providers. For me, it got to a point where it was so bad, I had to literally like find a counselor and be like, you know, start talking and unpacking things. And I think I've been, you know, it's been a few years and I'm still nowhere near where I want to be in terms of like managing emotions. But at least I've recognized, for me, I need to do that work on myself every single day. Because the moment I leave my emotions unchecked, it manifests in, you know, it creeps up on you. It's like, I don't know what to compare it to. It's like It's like, like cleaning your room or like doing something every day to make sure it doesn't get too bad, because before you know it, your room's a mess. Like and you've let it go, and it's like things like there's bowls of cereal like from days ago that you've just forgot about. If you do a little bit every day, overall you'll be better, but it is work. And I think poetry for me has been about unpacking emotions and having a dialogue with yourself. I think a lot of guys can find it, especially younger guys, can find it easier to just not take the steps to know themselves, get to know yourself. And in a way, I don't blame it, because things get real complicated. Like when you start exploring yourself and asking yourself, who am I?
Yes.
Suddenly life gets really complicated.
Yeah, of course.
But if as a guy, you're like, you know what, this is who I am, and I'm not going to dig beneath the surface on this, life is easier in a way, because then it becomes more linear. But I think in the long run, you're doing yourself a disservice, because every single one of us is very rich in character, and we're not all the same. We're not this one-dimensional man who's just about like getting a good job, having a family, providing a family. We're much more than this. But the first step to kind of realizing that is asking yourself difficult questions. Why do I think in this particular way? What's my relationship like with my dad, with my friends, with my community? What do I actually want to get out of life? What actually matters to me? Why am I upset by certain things? Why am I frustrated with certain things? These are really difficult questions, and there's no real answer. And your answer will change year to year. Poetry is just one way of doing that. But I know, it doesn't have to be poetry. Music, sports is another way, because I think with sports, you're kind of telling yourself to push past your limits. And then when you can't reach those limits, you kind of tell yourself, okay, what's going on? It's just that level of introspection. And I think it can be really easy not to be introspective sometimes, because we don't ask that of men. We just ask them to be a particular way. And, like you were saying, like sometimes your friends can get funny with you. Say, oh, why are you acting so, why are you acting like this? Like it's not that deep. It's not that deep. But like, I think it's a long journey to get to know yourself. And I think it's a lifelong endeavor, and it's worthwhile. Whatever way works for you. I'm not saying poetry. You don't have to be a poet, but ask yourself some of the bigger questions and try to get to know yourself properly. Because I think life is rich. It's really rich when you give yourself space and time to explore why you like the things you like, or why you care about the things you care about. Yeah.
That's beautifully said, and I completely agree with everything you've said. I think, introspection, I think you mentioned it. I think that's the key word. We have to be more introspective. There's so much of the world we don't understand. I think you have to always come out with humility, understand that you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Like literally, you know nothing about yourself, about why you are the way you are, about your family, about the wider world around you, about other people's perspectives and other people's experiences. So we have to be way more open to that. And I think introspection is very important. Poetry has allowed me to be introspective on a level where I see how expansive my world is, and I go, oh, okay, but this is just my perspective. What about other people? And I think if more guys go into that habit of being introspective and understanding the humility that comes with, of like, okay, if my world is this expansive and there's so many parts of myself that I'm yet to meet, what about other people? And you can be at least empathetic to that, people's struggles, people's experiences, and then we can start building something. Final question I have actually is, what kind of poet, circling back to the right at the beginning, we were talking about your journey of being a poet, what kind of poet do you hope to be? And follow-up question to that is that, I know it's a big question, follow-up question to that is, when people read your work, what do you hope they take away from it? What do you hope they feel?
So next year, one of my big goals is to put out a body of work. So whether that's a book, whether that's a pamphlet, just a small collection of poems, I want to put that out there. And for that, the overarching theme that I want to tackle is relationships. So what do I mean by that? I mean your relationship to yourself, kind of coming back to like digging deeper, know thyself, that's one of my favorite phrases. So your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your family, as you saw in my my chosen path was eggs. That's like a big theme. Your relationship with your friends, so like your social relationships, because I think the past couple of years, maybe it's because I'm getting older and like people are at different stages. You know, some of my friends are getting married, some of them starting families, buying houses in big jobs, some of them have lost jobs. You're at that phase of your life where like you need to kind of think about your friendships and like what does that mean to you? You know, how do you relate to childhood friends who you're no longer close with, like, but you're still friends, but like you're on different paths of life. So that's another thing. And then the last bit was your relationship with your community. So East London, what it means to me, what it means to be part of like the Bangladeshi immigrant community, the diaspora, your culture, that kind of thing. So yeah, God willing, I get that body of work out, and I want the reader to read that and think, okay, he's got a unique voice. I think that's really important to me, finding a voice that's unique, saying something that may not have been said in such a way, and helps them think about their own relationships as well in all of those different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ifti, it's beautiful. And I think, I definitely see that. You talk about unique voice. I think your perspective is amazing. The way you kind of write your poetry, like I've said already, it's kind of like so unique, and like you're able to resonate with me. I know for a fact. I know you resonate with a lot of other people. Your ability to host, because I've seen you host these nights. I know what it's like to be up there on that stage hosting. It's not easy at all, having all those eyes on you, but you do really well. You hold space for people really well. And I know you really run 2 open mics, so I know it's a lot of work, but keep going. You're doing really well. I really appreciate what you do, anything you do for the community. So thank you for staying with me today. Thank you for taking time with me today.
Nice one. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. And thank you guys for watching.
Yeah.
Until next time, peace.